Pompeii is one of those places everyone thinks they already understand. Ash, ruins, tragedy, the famous plaster casts. But honestly, when you dig deeper, the city is less about monuments and more about people. Ordinary people. People who woke up, stretched, ate breakfast, argued, laughed. And on the morning of August 24th, 79 AD, someone in one of those homes placed a very simple ceramic cup on a wooden kitchen table. Nothing special, nothing fancy, just a cup. It's strange how the smallest stuff survives when everything else collapses. The cup wasn't made for a rich merchant or a noble family. It wasn't decorated or glazed in bright colors. It was the sort of thing you'd pick up at a market stand without thinking twice. Yet, this cup ended up outliving the people who owned it, and basically the entire city. When you imagine that morning, it almost feels uncomfortably normal. Someone probably poured watered wine or a bit of mulsum into the cup. Maybe warmed some bread they bought the day before. Maybe a child was already awake, maybe still half asleep. The kitchen would have smelled like smoke from the old hearth, maybe olives, maybe figs. And then, the day that should have been completely ordinary simply wasn't. What makes this cup powerful isn't the object itself, it's what it represents. A morning routine that stopped mid-movement. A quiet moment interrupted so violently that everything froze. The cup is still where it was left. That's the part that hits you. It's like someone got up from the table and fully expected to sit back down.
The 2019 excavation in Pompeii's Reggio Chimbe started pretty quietly.
Archaeologists expected the usual. Some walls, maybe pottery fragments, the typical stuff. But the deeper they went, the more they realized this wasn't a typical dig. The soil layers weren't just preserving shapes, they were preserving moments. And not big, dramatic moments, but the tiny ones. When they uncovered the kitchen, it genuinely felt like they had opened the door to a room that had been locked from the outside for 2 millennia. The air obviously wasn't there anymore, but the feeling of the room somehow was. The soot on the walls, the half-charred wood, the collapsed ceiling. It all looked frozen, mid-collapse. And right in the middle of this little time bubble was the cup. Perfectly upright, perfectly ordinary, and so perfectly out of place in the middle of a disaster. One archaeologist said something like, "You could almost see the hand that placed it." The cup wasn't the only thing there. A loaf of bread cracked open by heat pressure. A few olives literally burned into tiny black stones. A wooden spatula, still recognizable, which is insane because wood isn't supposed to survive 2000 years. And yet all of it did. But the cup stood out because it didn't fall. Everything else either rolled, tipped over, or broke. The cup stayed loyal to gravity, like it refused to join the chaos. That stillness is what allowed researchers to reconstruct the family's final minutes with such accuracy. Because if the cup didn't move, then the table didn't move. And if the table didn't move, then panic must have started before the room shook. It's like the room was telling a story. The cup was just the narrator. Roman kitchens weren't designed for big fancy meals. Most families didn't have the money or the time. People grabbed bread from public bakeries, got hot food from street stalls, or ate leftovers. Home cooking was basically warming things up and making simple dishes. When you look at the kitchen where the cup was found, it fits this lifestyle perfectly. Nothing was luxurious, nothing was decorative, just functional. The hearth was small, almost improvised. The shelves were uneven. The jars were practical storage tools, nothing more. And then you look at the cup. Simple clay, rough texture, the kind of thing mass-produced because hundreds of families needed them daily. Scientists analyzing the cup didn't expect much, but what they found was surprisingly intimate. Traces of wine acid, hints of honey, tiny fruit sugar crystals. Basically, the fingerprints of a morning drink. Something someone actually held, sipped, and placed back on the table. And there's something oddly emotional about that. It makes the family feel real. Not anonymous ancient figures. Real people with routines. That cup wasn't made for history. It was made for breakfast. When researchers looked at everything around the cup, they realized something striking. This wasn't just a kitchen frozen in time. This was a morning frozen in time. A breakfast that never got finished. The bread was freshly reheated. The olives were set out. The figs were halfway prepared. And the cup, well, the cup looked like someone had just taken a sip and put it down. You can almost imagine it. A child sitting on a stool, swinging their legs. A parent slicing something on the table. Someone else yawning, maybe still waking up. Then the eruption hit. What's brutal is how fast it happened. No time to think, no time to grab belongings, barely time to stand up. Archaeologists could see the moment panic began, but also the moment life stopped. The small footprints in the ash, the overturned stool, the spilled figs, all these tiny frozen details. And in the middle of that whirlwind of fear, the cup stayed still. It's eerie how an object can look so peaceful in the middle of disaster. If you try to imagine the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, you probably picture lava flowing everywhere. But that's not really what happened. The real killer was the sky itself. Ash, fire, heat, and a sound so loud that some survivors described it as the mountain exploding like a giant's breath. And the strange thing is, the beginning didn't look deadly at all. At first it looked confusing. Around midday, people noticed a thin column of smoke rising from Vesuvius. Not unusual. Volcanoes hiss all the time. But within minutes, that narrow column turned into a monstrous pillar climbing into the sky, twisting and boiling like a dark storm cloud. The sunlight started to dim. Birds stopped singing. Dogs ran through the streets. Inside the little kitchen where the cup sat, nothing broke yet. The room didn't shake. The table didn't move. No dishes fell. But outside, ash started falling like dirty snow. Slow at first, then heavier. The weight on rooftops grew by the minute. You can almost feel the moment the family realized something was wrong. Maybe they heard people shouting outside. Maybe they stepped toward the door to look. Maybe someone said, "We should leave." But they waited just a little too long, because what came next was something no human could survive. A pyroclastic surge, basically a cloud of burning gas and ash, rushed down the volcano at a speed that outran sound. The heat was unreal, hotter than any fire they had ever seen. It entered the city like a silent wave. Inside the house, the air temperature skyrocketed in seconds. Wood blackened instantly. Food carbonized in place. Human bodies didn't burn, they simply stopped. And yet somehow, through this chaos, the cup remained exactly where it was left. Not because the cup was strong, but because the destruction was so fast that nothing had time to fall. That's the chilling part. This wasn't a slow collapse. It was a moment, a snap, a flash. A whole life interrupted before anyone even understood what was happening. When you look at the cup today, you don't just see pottery, you see a pause, a breath that never finished, a room caught between routine and catastrophe. Sometimes, the smallest object becomes the loudest storyteller.